One thing we haven't talked about yet is that there are a number of smaller airports also in Indiana. Places like Fort Wayne and Gary and Evansville have worked to try to bolster their part in the air travel game in the last especially 5 to 10 years. Gary and Evansville have put a lot of time in trying to be bigger, better airports and trying to be seen less as regional hubs that are expensive to get into or out of. Is there a way that you can make rail travel, bus travel, air travel cooperate better? You just talked about intermodal, and this is something that's going on in Seattle. One of the reasons for the light rail line from downtown Seattle is it goes south into Tacoma to SeaTac Airport. Is this something that we can figure into as well to try to get people to airports and make it cheaper maybe to fly from Evansville to Indianapolis if you have a business meeting or something?
Well, remember years ago, maybe you don't remember years ago, but I do, we used to have regular air service here into Bloomington, between here and Chicago. Eventually to Chicago, it stopped at a couple places. But that's pretty expensive, and the airline did not do well. So you think, wait a minute, we have a good highway that goes to the airport. That's kind of multimodal. You drive to the airport and then take the plane from there to San Francisco or whatever. Now, it doesn't make a great deal of sense to fly from Indianapolis to Chicago. That's a nightmare for airlines as well as for people having baggage fun.
Unless gas gets to be $7 a gallon.
And then maybe it's...
Then you might have the tipping point. But one of the things that our cities have failed at is in their design is we don't make the transportation seamless, where you can get off one mode onto another. Because you get to some of these smaller communities, you have to rent a car or have to go by taxi. And some of the better cities like San Francisco, Chicago, just get off the plane, you get onto the rail system, you're at the major cities in no time. And people like convenience. I think people are shying away from air travel because it's not convenient. Your planes break down, they get canceled.
Get the word out. It's really easy to get on the bus and go somewhere. It's really easy to get on a train and go somewhere. But get over that intimidation factor.
And Matt, what about in the Indiana General Assembly? You said the legislature has not responded very well. How would you get your colleagues in the legislature to take a more open view of all of the different possibilities that there exist for mass transit?
Well, I think that as with most things in the legislature, the people lead the legislature. We like to think we have all these statesmen that will, be forward-thinking and kind of lead the way, but in fact, we just respond to what our constituents want. And so you can see it beginning to develop now, some organization behind efforts to get the public engaged, to tell legislators we want better public transit in our communities, and that takes resources. I think one of the reasons why people are a little bit reluctant perhaps to use public transit if they don't have to is that we haven't capitalized the system enough to have them have schedules that are ultimately convenient. I lived and worked in Washington, D.C. for a long period of time, and you could just go into the metro and you knew that within 10 or 15 minutes at most, another train was going to come along. You never had to look at the schedule. You didn't have to think about transferring in any difficult way, and the system was always there. Now that takes a certain amount of money to make that happen, but I think that even a community like Bloomington, if you could have enough capital, enough buses, so you could have more lines, some more direct routes, I think you'd see a lot more people using the bus, even if they have a vehicle.
Well, with Washington, D.C., you're talking about a large population center, especially a large suburban area around Washington, D.C. You and I talked a couple of years ago about a study that was done talking about a rail line possibility from Bloomington through Indianapolis up to Muncie, and it seemed that one of the problems with the feasibility of that was going to be that rail line, in order for it to be financially feasible, would have to wind through so many small communities as to make the timetable prohibitive for people to even want to ride this, because it suddenly would not be any faster than driving their cars, and in many cases would probably be slower even if it was more cost effective. I mean, how do you come across to people to say, look, we can find a balance between these things and we can get people over time to come to this idea that you don't have to drive your car everywhere?
Well, I think that what that study showed is you need to place these rail lines where most of the people are, and what they said is you have to go through these bedroom communities south of Indianapolis to pick up the ridership. Now, I think that you could definitely figure out a way to get the train moving fast enough that it would still be convenient. Because the other thing that people often forget is a time on a train can be very productive. I mean, you can do work, and we have Wi-Fi on these things now, and you can really get a lot of work done or just kind of relax. You know, I'm a road warrior. I commute back and forth to Indianapolis every day when the legislature's in session, and you can get stuck in some traffic jams, and you're just in the car. It's not very productive. And I often thought if I could, you know, ride the rails from Bloomington to Indianapolis, I could get an awful lot of work done during that time.
George, I'd like to get a response from you and Marty on this. Let's talk about the economic development incentives that building out a train or a bus or even a rideshare system would have. What kind of impact would it have economically on central Indiana to be able to build out any sort of public transit system that goes intercity?
Well, the possibilities would be fantastic. Rail is particularly attractive because it looks like it's there and it's going to stay there. With the buses, people are not quite so sure. Well, the highways aren't going to be ripped up, but the bus doesn't always have to run on the highway. So where you have invested in rail transportation around the country, there's usually been quite a bit of development around the stations. In fact, even here in Indiana, if you go back in history, if you go south of Indianapolis, you'll find Stop 1 road, Stop 2 roads, Stop 8. Those were the stops on the Interurban Electric Railway that went down to Louisville. And if you look around those roads where the stop used to be, you'll find there's some older houses and businesses there. They were there 100 years ago, whenever line was developed. You can get development with bus service too. We've seen it here in Bloomington because we have very extensive bus service. Maybe we could use more, but there's a lot of construction along those lines, especially aimed at students. And the knowledge that, hey, we build apartments here, we know we can get the students to the campus on the bus.
One of the good parts about my job is I get to travel around the country and I see cities like St. Louis, Portland, that have light rail systems. And to see the development of the area, mixed use, condos, apartments, retail, office, it makes life a lot better for those who live in those areas because they're spending less time commuting. They can walk from one place to another, or they can take a short train ride to get to their office, and that frees up their time to do other things in life besides sit in a car.
I'm glad you brought up Portland as an example. One of the things we were talking about as we were researching this program is Portland, we were kind of joking, has really thrown everything they possibly can at the wall in terms of rail travel, bus travel, anything you could possibly have. It seems like Portland is a place you can find it. And I think perhaps as a consequence, Portland every year is ranked as one of the most livable cities in America. Is there a lesson that a place like in Indianapolis can take from the experiment that has gone on in Portland or places like it?
You have to have the will to want to do something. And whatever it is in Portland, they decided we're going to do this. San Diego did the same thing. And San Diegans, for whatever reason, have a strong will to get things done. They have one of the finest zoos in the world. They decided they're going to have a grade A transportation system, public transportation system. So they started the San Diego Trolley. And it's expanded and expanded. And at Portland, it's the same thing, same kind of approach, a strong will to do it. And then they figure out how.
We mentioned gas prices in our opening, and I think that, of course, that's the part of transportation that most people think about the most on a daily basis. I wonder if each of you gets a sense in your various walks of life that there has been a desensitization to the $4 a gallon gasoline this year that we did not see a couple of years ago when for the first time gas went over $4 a gallon and people said, whoa, I need to stop driving as much. This year, you heard Greg Sider from AAA say he doesn't necessarily expect that kind of reaction. So I wonder, are people becoming desensitized? Do we need $5 a gallon gas for people to be thinking about how they're going to change their habits this time around?
Personally, I don't think they have become desensitized, and I'll tell you why. In May, when those numbers were hitting $4.29 a gallon, our ridership went up about 17–18% just for that month. And that's with the university out of session for most of the month, so you can't say, well, there's all student riders. Now, these are town folks who decided, I can't afford to fill up my car, I'm going to look for an alternative. And a lot of these folks who are working at jobs that don't pay a whole heck of a lot, your service workers, food service, people who work in the big box lumber stores, they can't just buy a car at the drop of a hat because of their wages. And so when you look at the cost of the car, the gas, the insurance, and what they're earning, transit is a perfect alternative for that group of riders that we have.